we must love God. We must love God to the extent that we love Him more than anything else. When we reach to a point that we love God, He will learn to teach us His ways. He speaks of His ways and He says His ways and His thoughts are different from ours. His thoughts are different from ours. But we must come more to a clear learning, and we may come to the understanding of Christ. We must love Him as the apple of our eye. We must learn to love. We must learn to love everyone, irrespective of the indifferences. So I speak unto you, all men of all nature, of any type, of all, for all have come from God, and all shall return. But irrespective of whatever that you may come from, irrespective of where you may come from, it does not change. We must not defile our covenant that we have made with Christ. It is the covenant that is most supreme more than all things, because desolating the covenant, it is idol worship. We must flee away from all idol worshipping, because of all things that God cannot live with, it is an idol before Him. God does not deal with idols before Him. He loves men more than, but He cannot live with another God. It enrages God, you having made your own God and forgetting your Creator. You forget your Creator, who created the heavens and the earth. He measured earth with His palm, and He measured heaven with a span of his palms. It is how mighty He is, that all things that come and exist, they are through Him. But He does all that because He loves us. God does not exist in time. He literally does not exist. I do not speak this to convince you, but God does not exist in time. He was there before the foundations of this earth. He will be there at the end of all things. It is Him who has been there. So let us learn to abide in His word, His unfailing love, the unprevailing love, that we may become like Christ, that we may have the mind, the understanding of Christ, that we may never be shaken by all things that may come, or that may proceed from any part, anywhere. We may stand firm and bold through Christ. For many things have fallen, many things have fled away from Christ. But let us not be like the people of the world, for we have not come from there. We have come from a place that we shall return to. Let us not forget the light. Christ is the light to all things. He is the light. He has been there since the foundations of this world, and it is the place that He's planning us to go to. He's preparing for us a place with our Father, but He needs a person who has not defiled His covenant. How can you claim you love God and you have not reached the concession of understanding that love that He speaks of? He says that how can you claim you love God when you do not love your neighbor? You do not have love for one another, but you claim you have love for the invisible God you do not see. So I condemn it that you love not your brethren. I condemn it. I urge you to love your brethren. Love all that comes, because it is Christ. It is His working. For all things come to pass, all things come to an end, but His love, it is unfailing. It does not have a limit. It never reaches a point and it has faded. It never reaches a point where it comes to an end. Let us understand that love, and we may get to trust God. How can you trust what you do not love? How can you trust what you do not love? It is the trust that we have in God. It is through love that when we reach to a point that we have loved God to the extent that the measure of his love, it has reached to the extent that what we think, it has reached to the extent the way our hearts, the imaginations of our heart is thinking. That is the stature that God expects us to be. That the love that we have for him, it is the same love that we shall share to our brethren. It is the same love that we shall share to one enemy. It is the same love we shall share to one oppressor. It is the love that God has for all men. He does not segregate. That is why he speaks and he says that when he sends rain, when it is to rain, it rains for both the good and the bad. It is his love. It does not distinguish. Love covers all things. Love, it is love. Love overwhelms sin. It is because of the love that he has for his son that we are made clean. That we are made clean. So he teaches us to love the brethren. We love one another. We have that love, that the zealous love that we have for Christ, for all men, for all things that may proceed, that it changes us in all ways and all aspects, that we may never return, we may never be the same, we can never have the same mind that we had, because Christ has reached us, has made us to reach a point that we no longer feel the same like we started, because the love that he has for us, it is the same love that he needs us to share for our brethren, for another, and it is that love that brings the trust. It is the love that brings the trust. Because we love God, we have to learn to trust the love that we have for God, that all things happen for his will. That all things happen for his will. Nothing that can ever go wrong, because it is him who plans all things. It is him. There is nothing that can go without him understanding. There is nothing the devil can operate on this earth without him ever knowing. It is his perfect love that comes to all things. It is his perfect love. So as Christians, as people who have embraced Christ, people who have the testimony of Christ, people who have the testimony of Christ, because having the testimony of Christ, that Christ died and rose again, and keeping the covenant, those things, hold unto those things, the testimony that Christ died and rose again for the remission of sins, for the remission of sins, that we may be cleansed, we may be made right with God, we may be right, the justification that we are made with our Father. It is through the testimony of Christ, that when we embrace the testimony of Christ and the love that he has for us, and we keep the covenant with one another, it is love. We love God and we love one another, but we understand that God has loved us above all things, that all creatures, he speaks and he says that, why do you worry? Don't the birds of the air, they do not work, they do not farm, but he feeds them. The lilies, they dress more excellent than Solomon. But he says that, are you not more important than them? Are you not more of value? God values his creation. His creation. He values it. He sees a nature of him embedded in his creation that he created with his own hands. For all creation has bared witness to the love of Christ, to the fellowship, to the word. It has bared fellowship to the word, that it has come to the point that it has loved God more than all things. That the trees, they do not do anything, they have love for one another. They have love for one another. So it is the same love that Christ sees in all nature. He sees love in all nature. He sees love in all things. He sees love everywhere. He sees love prevailing, for all things come to one end except his word. Except his word. And he comes and he speaks there and he says that he leaves us with peace. Christ leaves us with peace. He came and he spoke of all things, but he speaks of the peace. He speaks of the peace, that of all things that may happen, peace, it is what is more important of all things. It is what is more important of all things. We must come to a point where we have the perfect understanding of God. It is not having an impartial understanding of God, of who God is, of how to operate. How long shall we be babies in Christ? How long shall we know God? How long shall we take to come to the understanding that we may have more understanding and learn to differentiate between things that are important and things that are not important? It is what love does. It is the thing that teaches us to separate between what is important and what is not. If we have not come to a point that you have embraced love, all things become complex. Life becomes hard. Love bears all things. Love changes all things. Love changes men. So, having understood that testimony, that love, it is more of clear understanding of Christ, let us learn to lean and trust in the love that Christ leaves us with.